The clatter of chains, the hiss of a whip tearing through heavy, suffocating air. And then, silence. Beneath the scorching sun of New Mexico territory, a young girl stood on a rickety wooden platform, bare feet raw and bleeding, wrists bound by rusted iron. The crowd's eyes fixed on her, not as a person, but like a tired old horse, or a cow about to be slaughtered. The auctioneer, a fat man dripping with sweat, slammed his gavel. Next one. 18 years old, no husband, no family, been sold more than once already, starting bid $5. The crowd erupted in laughter. She ain't worth a nickel. Couldn't do a thing right if she tried. The girl lowered her head. Her name was Clara Duvall. Her dress hung in tatters, hair matted and tangled, hiding the bruise across her cheek. She hadn't cried in a long time. In places like this, tears only lowered your price. And then, a voice cut through the jeers, low, rough, but steady. "I'll pay 25. Every head turned. There he stood, an older man in a worn brown coat, streaks of silver running through his beard. His name was Elias Boone, a former cavalryman past 50, his face carved by the desert wind and the years behind him. The crowd murmured, $25 for a girl everyone else called worthless? The auctioneer blinked, then struck the gavel. Sold! Clara didn't look at him, didn't flinch. But as Elias stepped forward, removed his hat, and caught her eyes, his heart faltered. He had seen those eyes before. 8 years ago, when fire and blood swept through the Duvall family. He whispered her name. She gave no answer. And under the burning sky, one question rose up, not just for Elias, but for all of us. Did he buy this girl to own her? Or to redeem his own soul? Elias laid the money down, counting each wrinkled, sweat-stained bill, as if emptying the very bottom of his pockets. The trader snatched the cash, then shoved Clara off the platform. She nearly stumbled, but Elias caught her. "Come," he muttered. His voice was rough, gravelly, yet it carried no command. The dirt road stretched away from the auction pen, dust rising in the hot wind. Clara followed behind, the chain on her wrists clinking with every step. Each sound was a reminder. She was still a commodity. At the edge of the road, Elias stopped. From his coat pocket, he drew an old, rust-spotted key. Slowly, he turned it in the lock. The irons fell, hitting the ground with a dull clang, leaving raw red welts on her skin. "In a free country," he murmured, almost to himself, "no one should wear chains." Clara didn't look at him. Her gaze drifted far into the horizon, where the desert shimmered like an ocean of fire. They mounted their horses, Elias on his weary old gelding, Clara on a smaller, tired mare whose head hung low. Neither spoke. Only the sound of hooves echoing across the prairie, broken now and then by the hiss of the wind through the grass. At last, Clara spoke, her voice quiet, but sharp as a blade. "You paid for me. So, do whatever you want." Elias yanked the reins, his horse jerking to a halt. He turned to her, and for one raw instant, the pain in his eyes said more than words ever could. But he gave no answer. He only nudged his horse forward, riding on in silence. The road towards San Miguel stretched out like it had no end. The sun hammered down, turning the earth into burning iron, while waves of hot wind carried dust high into the sky. Elias rode ahead, his back straight, broad shoulders bearing the weight of years spent in war. Clara followed behind, clutching the reins tightly, her eyes fixed on the dirt, refusing to look at the man who now led her away. Midway, Elias slowed and pulled up beneath a lone oak standing guard over the plain. He tied his horse, then reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a battered old canteen. Stepping closer, careful not to startle her, he offered it. "Drink." Clara hesitated. Her tired blue eyes narrowed, measuring him the way someone learns to measure false kindness, after years of surviving it. But the fire in her throat left no choice. She reached out slowly, fingers trembling as they brushed the canteen. She drank, wiped her lips, then suddenly locked eyes with him. "You think one sip of water changes anything?" Her voice was dry, bitter. Elias didn't look away. He lowered himself onto a root, set his hat aside. "I didn't buy you to keep you. I just couldn't stand to see them sell you again." Clara gave a short, hollow laugh, like dead wood cracking under the sun. "And what's the difference? In the end, I'm still being led off by a stranger." He said nothing. Words now would only harden her hatred. He looked down, gripping the canteen tight, and for a moment he remembered another pair of eyes, the eyes of Clara's father, on that day of fire and blood. Eyes he'd never been able to forget. Clara suddenly rose, her stare as cold as steel. "Don't play the hero. You bought me. That's all." She turned sharply, striding back toward the horses, yanking the reins as if daring to ride off alone. Elias watched her, throat tight, unable to speak. The day sank toward evening, the sunlight bleeding red across the trail. Elias and Clara rode in silence toward his desolate ranch. No words between them, only the wind whispering through the dry grass, like the voices of the past refusing to die. When night fell, they stopped in a narrow canyon to rest. Elias built a small fire, set an iron skillet on the flames. The crackle of burning wood threw their shadows long against the rock walls, two wandering souls caught between earth and memory. Clara sat apart, knees pulled close, eyes avoiding his. Her fingers clung to a length of chain still clamped around her wrist, the last piece of iron he hadn't yet broken. After a long silence, she reached into the pocket of her torn dress and pulled out something small. A faded handkerchief, its edges stitched with the letters CD, the thread nearly worn away. She stroked it gently, the firelight glimmering in her damp eyes. "My father. He gave me this, before everything burned. I've kept it hidden 8 years now, from house to house, hand to hand. It's the only thing I have left." Elias froze. He knew that handkerchief. The memory struck hard. The Duvall home engulfed in flames, screams splitting the night, soldiers and scavengers shouting as they stole the land. And he, just a young cavalryman then, standing not far away, powerless. His voice came rough, almost a whisper. "Your father, Robert Duvall, wasn't it?" Clara's head snapped up, eyes blazing through the dark. You knew my father?" Elias drew a slow breath. His hand shook as he held it toward the fire, as though for warmth, but truly to hide the trembling. "I was there, that night." His throat caught. "I saw it all." Clara went pale, the handkerchief quivering in her grip. You were there?" The fire roared, shadows closing in like a noose. Silence fell, so heavy even the wind seemed to retreat. And the girl did not yet know. The truth Elias carried was far crueler than the flames she remembered. By morning, the sun rose red over the horizon, painting the desert like a sea of fire. Elias and Clara rode toward his old ranch, a lonely place tucked inside a barren valley. The fences lay broken, the roof sagged low, abandoned for decades, or so it seemed. Clara stayed silent, her eyes scanning the land like a bird that had once been snared and would never trust the sky again. They had just led the horses into the yard when dust rose on the far road. 3 riders approached, sunlight flashing off metal. At their head rode Sheriff Harlan Voss, the lawman of San Miguel. He dismounted slowly, a tall figure in a worn leather coat, a tarnished silver badge pinned to his chest. His crooked smile carried no warmth, only mockery. "Well, Elias Boone, I figured you vanished with the war," he drawled. His gaze slid sideways and stopped on Clara's wrist. The raw marks left by the shackles did not escape him. For an instant, the smile vanished. Clara gripped the fence rail, knuckles white, breath quickening. Voss stepped closer, his eyes sharp as a blade. "That scar, I remember now. Duvall, the traitor's girl." Elias moved instantly, planting himself between Clara and the sheriff. His voice came low, but iron strong. "That's enough, Voss. She's under my protection." The sheriff chuckled, dry as bone, and tapped the handle of the revolver at his hip. "Protection? Don't forget. Her father swung for treason. And if the town learns she's still breathing, they'll be calling for blood." From his pocket, he drew a polished bullet. He set it gently on the fence post, right in front of Elias. A reminder, Boone. Some ghosts. Don't stay buried. With that, he swung back into the saddle. The three riders wheeled their horses and thundered off, a storm of dust rolling in their wake. Clara's hands trembled as she picked up the bullet, staring at it like an omen carved in lead. She turned to Elias, her voice no louder than a breath. He'll be back, won't he? Elias gripped the brim of his hat, eyes dark as the coming night. Yeah, and next time, blood will spill. By nightfall, the sky changed with frightening speed. Dark clouds rolled down from the mountains, thunder rumbling like fire in the heavens. Elias and Clara sheltered inside the old wooden house. The wind howled through the cracks in the walls, carrying dust across the room. A single oil lamp flickered, stretching their shadows tall against the boards. Clara huddled by the hearth, clutching the handkerchief stitched with CD. Her eyes never left the fire. Across from her, Elias sat with a tin cup of black coffee in his hand, untouched. The silence between them pressed heavy, as thick as the storm gathering outside. At last, Elias set the cup down. His voice came low, rough as gravel. Clara, there's something you need to know. I've kept it buried too long. She turned sharply, her eyes bright in the dim light. Elias drew a deep breath, his hands trembling as he clenched them tight. The night the Duvall ranch burned. I was there, but not to save anyone. My father, his voice cracked. My father made a deal with Voss. He sold your family out for land. I heard it. I knew. But I didn't have the courage to stop it. I just stood and watched. Clara froze, lips trembling. The handkerchief slipped from her fingers, falling to the wooden floor. You stood there and let my parents die? Elias bowed his head, eyes rimmed red. I was a coward. I lived. Your family didn't. And I've carried that sin for 8 long years. Thunder cracked, lightning lit the room, and for an instant, Clara's face was laid bare in its glow. Anger, pain, disbelief, all burning in her eyes. She stumbled back, her hand brushing the revolver that hung on the wall, a reflex born of fear and fury. You think confessing now will make me forgive you? Her voice broke, sharp and cold. Elias didn't argue. He only lowered his gaze. No, but you deserve the truth. At that moment, the storm struck in full force. Wind screamed, rain hammered the roof, thunder split the night. And through the chaos came another sound, urgent, pounding, relentless. The sound of hooves, close, too many to count. The windows rattled with every pounding hoof outside. Lightning split the sky, revealing figures in black coats, faces wrapped in red scarves. The Red Jack Gang, feared across San Miguel for kidnapping and the selling of souls. A rasping voice bellowed through the storm. Boone, hand the girl over. She's our property. Clara froze, her heart hammering like war drums. Elias shoved her back into the shadows, pressing a battered revolver into her trembling hands. Take it. Fire only if there's no other choice. She shook, never having touched a gun before, but Elias's hard, unyielding stare left her no room to refuse. She gripped the worn wooden handle. Suddenly the door burst wide. 3 men stormed in, guns drawn. Elias fired twice, thunder mixing with the crack of gunfire, muzzle flashes sparking like lightning inside the cabin. One outlaw dropped, the other 2 dove for cover behind crates. Clara backed against the wall, hands shaking. One bandit spotted her and shouted, "The girl's here!" He charged. Instinct took over. Clara squeezed the trigger with her eyes shut. The roar was deafening, the smell of gunpowder sharp in her nose. When she opened her eyes, the man lay sprawled at her feet. Her hand quivered, but in her eyes now burned something new. Fear, yes, but also a fierce will to survive. Outside, hooves thundered, voices shouted. Elias yelled over the storm. "They won't stop, Clara! Hold that gun tight!" The heavens opened, rain crashing on the roof, drowning out the screams. And through the downpour, another rider approached. Not an outlaw, the sheriff. Harlan Voss sat tall in the saddle, wide brim hat shadowing half his face. yet his crooked smile gleamed in the lightning's flash. The game's truly begun, Boone. Clara's breath caught. In that moment, she understood. Their enemies weren't just the outlaws. It was the law itself, the past, and every ghost that had come to drag them down into the dark. The storm howled outside, but the thunder of hooves fell silent when Sheriff Harlan Voss rode into the yard. Red Jack's gang backed off at once, giving way like wolves to the pack leader. Voss dismounted slowly, his boots caked with mud, lightning flashing against the cold curl of a smile on his face. "Boone," he drawled, stepping closer and rapping the butt of his revolver with a slow hand. "I told you, some ghosts don't ever sleep. And today, that girl goes back to where she belongs." Clara stood inside the cabin, the little pistol clenched in both hands, her heart hammered. But for the first time she did not cower behind Elias. Elias came out onto the porch, rain plastering his coat to his skin, his old Winchester leveled. "No," he said. "I let her father burn once. I won't let it happen again to his daughter." Voss's eyes flashed, first surprise, then a pleased, cruel amusement. "Well, well, finally you confess. But it's too late, Boone. They'll call you a traitor for hiding the traitor's child. And blood will wash it clean." They stood face to face, only a few paces apart. Rain pounded the roof, thunder split the sky. Then Voss drew as quick as lightning. Elias fired at the same instant. Two deafening reports echoed into the night. Gunsmoke poured like fog. Clara screamed and lunged for the doorway. In the haze, Elias staggered, a bullet grazing his shoulder, dark blood blooming across his coat. Voss stayed upright, snarling like a wounded beast, but Elias's shot had ripped a long red scar across the sheriff's cheek. "You'll die tonight!" Voss howled, signaling Red Jack to surge forward. Clara dragged Elias back inside and slammed the door. The little wooden house trembled under a hail of bullets. Elias gritted his teeth and tried to raise his gun. Clara pressed his hand to the stock with fierce, steady force. "You're not alone," she said. "If they want blood, they'll have to cross my body first." Amid the storm's fury, the girl who had once been a captive now stood shoulder to shoulder with the man who'd been carrying guilt for years. And what the audience knows, this fight will decide whether they claw their way back to life, or become another tragic blaze burned into the West's history. The storm slowly broke apart. After the long night, dawn spilled through the window, casting light across the battered cabin that still smelled of gun smoke. Red Jack's gang was gone, leaving a few bodies half buried in the blood-soaked mud. Sheriff Harlan Voss had vanished into the rain as well, carrying with him a threat that was far from finished. Elias sat on the porch, shoulder bandaged, eyes heavy with fatigue as he looked out over the drenched fields. Clara stepped quietly beside him, her tangled hair still wet, hands trembling, but her gaze had changed. It no longer carried only fear. Now, a quiet fire burned there. She set the revolver on the porch steps, her voice soft but steady. "I never wanted to hold this, but last night it saved us both. Maybe I'm not as weak as I thought." Elias turned, the lines of guilt and years etched deep in his face. He wanted to speak, but only nodded. Clara's actions had spoken louder than any words. That afternoon, Elias raised 2 wooden markers by the fence. With an old pocket knife, he carved the names. One read, Robert Duvall. The other simply, family. Clara stood before them for a long time, fingers tracing the rough cuts in the wood. Tears fell, but they were no longer the tears of suffocation. They were tears of release. She turned, handing Elias the faded handkerchief. "Keep it. It was my father's. But now I think you need it more. Not for forgiveness, for remembrance." Elias's hands shook as he took it, cradling both the weight of his sin and the chance to make it right. That night they sat by the fire. No longer 2 wandering ghosts, but 2 survivors learning how to trust again. Yet both knew Sheriff Voss was not finished, and when he returned, it would be in blood and fire. "So now I'll ask you, If you were Clara, could you forgive the man who once stood silent as your family was betrayed? And if you were Elias, could you find redemption in a world already stained with blood? If this story struck a chord in your heart, hit like, leave us a comment, and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter. Because even in the harshest corners of the Wild West, sometimes people still find their way home.